thriving, playing, living life to the fullest. Our mission for Kansans since 2003. We are Kansas Spine and Specialty Hospital, proudly supporting KPTS, Public Television for Kansas.
The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, celebrating KPTS's nearly 50 years of community support in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
It is time for another half hour of Hatteberg's People. Coming up,
I can remember maybe 3 or 4 instances where I was sort of thumbed out of the room by, not Reagan, but by maybe the chief of staff or something like that.
what really happened behind the scenes in the Reagan White House? Well, this former Kansan had a front row seat, and his photographs are a window into history. Also,
for 4 years, I had the highest score in the state, and so 2 months ago, they sent me a letter and told me to come to the Nationals in New York.
from her dining room table to the world stage, this Kansan competed for the National Monopoly Championship. Wait till you hear how she did. Plus,
he's back again. He's back again. Oh, take home Mark is in again. He'll laugh and tell a joke, and he'll ask about your folks, 'cause old take home Mark is back again.
in case you didn't get that, he's back again. At least he was in 1991. Some say Archie McGaw was the most famous man in Wichita, thanks to his down-home personality and his legendary hamburgers. It's another Hatteberg classic coming your way. And
there's been 2 or 3 times in the last 2 weeks out in the sun and the heat and the wind. I was just about ready to call her off. And seeing it this evening, I think it's been worth it.
his canvas is a farm field, his paintbrush a tractor and a disc. You'll meet this Kansas artist who has wowed the world with his giant earthly portraits. Hello, I'm Susan Peters. Larry is on assignment. We'll have those stories and many more on this week's edition of Hatteberg's People, starting right now.
These stories are like old friends. Their lives radiate from the screen like prophets of the past. They were teachers, but not in a classroom. Instead, they taught about life to those around them who cared to listen, and I was their student.
His talent was taking pictures. His focus, some of the most famous men in world history. Photographer Pete Souza cut his teeth capturing Kansans on film, working for the Hutch News. But he really made a name for himself as the official presidential photographer for Ronald Reagan. In 1992, Souza came back to Kansas and gave Larry the inside scoop on what it was like to work for the Gipper.
I'm more of a photographer that tries to capture, real people and real life situations.
Former Kansan Pete Souza had what many still photographers would consider a dream job. For 7 years, he had nearly total access to President Ronald Reagan. Souza was a white photographer who saw with his camera those moments that were hidden from the rest of us.
Most people don't know this. He actually would go riding outside the gates of Camp David.
The pictures are part of a book Souza has published of his years in the White House. While he may have been in Washington, his roots were in Kansas. He started his career at the Hutchinson News newspaper.
It was my first job out of K-State, and I think I learned how to be a newspaper photographer at the Hutch News.
And he made award-winning, unforgettable pictures during his Kansas years.
A story like that would get me all excited.
Visiting with old friends at the Hutch News, managing editor Roger Verdon remembers a talented young photographer.
I think what Pete had was that human touch.
Sure, I threw a few tantrums back here. I'm impatient as hell.
But it was a phone call from an editor friend who thrust him to the corridors of power, a chance to photograph the presidency from the inside out.
I thought it was always kind of interesting that Ronald Reagan never took his sport coat off in the Oval Office. You'd walk in, and he'd be seated at the desk wearing a sport coat. And I asked him about it one time, and he thought it would be disrespectful to the office not to wear a sport coat. This is one situation that I'll never forget.
It was the Superpowers Summit in Reykjavik, Iceland. It wasn't going well for the president.
And then I could just see the anger and especially Reagan's face. I had never seen Ronald Reagan that angry before.
Souza is a reluctant author, but one who believes these pictures should see the light of day rather than rest in the archive.
I can remember maybe 3 or 4 instances where I was sort of thumbed out of the room by, not Reagan, but by maybe the chief of staff or something like that. And when I heard the word covert, you know, time to leave the room. I didn't want to know that stuff.
During his last few minutes in Hutch, he went on a police call.
How are the cops with you guys?
He left his camera at his side, mostly. He just saw old friends.
How come you guys don't have coats on? Aren't you cold?
It's a long way from the streets of Hutchinson to the White House. Pete Souza made that trip, and he made memories for all of us.
I felt that I was an observer. I mean, I had a front row seat to history.
After working for President Reagan, Pete worked for the Chicago Tribune, then taught photography at Ohio University. And then in 2008, he was back working in the White House, this time as the official photographer for President Barack Obama. Here's another Kansan who made a splash on the national stage. Her name is Jessica Pannell. Just a teenager in 1995, Jessica was wheeling and dealing in some of the best real estate in America, and she was cashing in big.
Callus, make a comparison.
Last week, Jessica Pannell was just another 15-year-old freshman at Newton High School.
Yes, pass the dice.
Then, this week, she played in the national finals of the Monopoly Game Championship in New York.
I was really excited. I thought it was a lot of fun.
So there she was, a girl from Kansas playing Monopoly in the big time.
For 4 years, I had the highest score in the state, and so 2 months ago, they sent me a letter and told me to come to the Nationals in New York.
42 other people competed in the playoffs that were held at the FAO Swartz and Company.
Yeah, it gets tense there at the end. And when you're neck and neck with someone, it's really nerve-wracking. The final game lasted about, they said 100 minutes before 3 of us went bankrupt.
Her main competitor was Roger Craig, a 34-year-old tire salesman from Harrisburg, Illinois.
Some are kind of serious. They're all really nice and friendly, good sports.
In the end, Craig monopolized the game by grabbing property and most of the play money, and he was declared the winner.
I'm kind of disappointed, but I'm really happy with first runner-up. I think that's really an honor.
We're going to have you write the answers on the board, and then we're going to...
Arriving back from New York late last night, today Jessica assumes her normal school routine, except for all those radio and newspaper interviews.
Called out a lot of classes to have phone interviews. Spent my whole break on the phone.
For a 15-year-old to compete in a national tournament, Kansans should know she served them well, coming in second place. Already at school, she's being challenged to play.
Yeah, my homeroom teacher already has.
Jessica says the game has taught her the art of negotiations. It's also taught her a little bit on how to play life's little game.
I guess when you go out there, just play to win.
Well, Jessica went on to get a law degree from KU. Now she works as an aviation attorney in Kansas City. Well, there's certainly no monopoly on hamburgers around here. Burger joints are everywhere, but not all are created equal. Here is a story about a burger joint unlike any other. And what really made it special was the man who was doing the flipping.
He's back again, oh, take home burger Arky's in again. Since Arky's been re-elected, take home burger's been corrected, now it's time to see old Arky down then. Come on in.
Listen, neighbor, Arky's back. Arky's back. Good old Arky.
Hi, how are you today?
For 40 years, Arky, otherwise known as Earl W. McGaw, has been in the hamburger business.
Oh, I have been tired of cooking them. Back to 13 hours, used to run 13 hours a day solid.
I'll have 3 with everything but ketchup and an order of fries, please.
He fried for 4 generations.
Yeah, back in the late 50s, my dad and I used to come in here.
8 years ago, he retired and sold the business, but recently bought it back because the new owner had health problems. That's why Arky's back.
He's back again. He's back again. Oh, take home Arky's in again. He'll laugh and tell a joke, and he'll ask about your folks, 'cause old take home Arky's back again.
This one-man burger stand is about the size of the average bedroom, and sometimes people ask where they're supposed to sit.
I'd say, well, anywhere out there on the grass that you can find a dry spot will be all right, see. Yeah.
His business is simple: burgers, fries, and a drink, and no computer cash register. Now folks have told him to buy a new register.
305.
Arky says, no way, he wants to be like his uncle.
Yeah, I thought about it a few times. Every time I think about it, I think about my uncle back in Arkansas, that his cash register consists of 3 chili bowls and a cigar box under the counter, and he done better than I did.
So if you want a taste of the past, a joke or two, and a burger from the same man who probably fried one for your grandfather, well, folks, Arky's back.
He's back again. He's in again. Oh, take home Arky's in again. You'd think 40 years would change anything, but Arky's burgers stay the same, 'cause old take home Arky's back again.
Unfortunately, all good things come to an end. 27 years later, Take Home a Burger is gone, and so is Arky. He passed away in 2008 at the age of 87. You can never underestimate the importance of forward thinking and good leadership. It took both to save an important part of the community of Independence, Kansas, and make it the best in the nation.
I likened it to winning the Heisman Trophy, and I guess that kind of puts it in perspective.
The Independence Public Library not only came back from the dead, but now holds the distinction of being the best small-town library in the nation. That's according to Library Journal magazine. But in 2009, when Julie Hildebrand was named library director, this place was a disaster.
And when I took a look at the financial situation, I realized that we didn't have enough funds to keep the library open through the end of the year.
Today, it is a national example of how to do libraries right. So, how did Julie pull the library from the brink of oblivion to national prominence? Well, she says the town pulled together and everyone helped.
What the city did was gave us some additional funding. I also went to the Friends of the Library, and they also kicked in a little extra additional funding. But what was the most difficult was that we had to let about half of our staff go. Very difficult decisions.
But what they also needed was innovation. The library couldn't operate the same way it always had and stay relevant.
What happens when you put a handful of librarians in a bad economy? You get innovation. What we did was we instituted a teamwork approach, and in doing so, it gave each staff member some additional responsibility and some pride and ownership in what was happening with the library.
They added high-capacity broadband, created an iPhone app, and used social networking, plus began an email newsletter. They also loaned ebooks to library patrons. That's zooming in popularity, and this library is on the cutting edge. When local schools had to cancel their summer programs, the library offered classes taught by volunteers, many of the learning programs designed by library staff. Now, those who homeschool came to rely more on the library as a necessary resource. The library also created partnerships with local businesses.
A lot of animals are still hiding.
Storytime programs for children and moms continue to be successful, again taught by volunteers. And for those who support the library, winning this award was a welcome surprise.
There were just gasps. We were quite surprised and quite excited.
The accolades have been coming in from everywhere, not just the community, but all over the United States.
I found my niche in life now, and that's how our staff feel, that working at the library, we're able to really make a difference in our community and in people's lives, and that's where the sparkle comes from. So it's a busy place. We're always packed.
Well, Julie just recently moved on, but she left behind a great legacy in the public library that continues to enrich lives in independence. The Kansas countryside is beautiful, no matter what, but what happens when an artist does a little tinkering? In this case, you end up with masterpieces that are sure to wow anyone who's passing overhead. This story is from 1984.
No doubt you remember Stan. He's a homegrown artist from Dodge City whose large murals like this one have given him national attention. Well, in 1981, he tried something different. A portrait of the Indian chief Satanta, carved with a tractor and a disc on 160 acres of land. As his portraits grew larger, so did his fame. His plow picture, as some called it, was carried on several network television shows and in hundreds of newspapers. But what most people didn't know is that this picture was only a prelude to his next project. Now, 12 miles north of Dodge City, the Earth has long since reclaimed the Satanta picture. But now in a nearby field, the artist is putting the finishing touches on his latest portrait. A portrait of Will Rogers.
I've had this dream for about 5 years now, and it's finally going to come together.
Like an engineer surveying a new road, Stan uses small flags as guides for the disc he pulls behind the tractor. A scale drawing has already been made, but the final result is only seen in Stan's mind, and he feels the pressure.
I know this thing is feasible. It's just got to work. I've got to get it done.
Forming a picture with a tractor is like painting with your eyes closed. It's difficult, and to see results, Stan has to get high, about 3,000 feet high. Will Rogers, a 160-acre portrait, 1/2 mile by 1/2 mile. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
There's been 2 or 3 times in the last 2 weeks out in the sun and the heat and the wind, and I was just about ready to call her off. And seeing it this evening, I think it's been worth it.
There's no question that it's worth it, and the best part is yet to come. Stan is planting the portrait with milo, corn, wheat, and soybeans. So as the seasons change, the picture will be an ever-changing kaleidoscope of colors.
It gives me quite a feeling. It really does.
Stan Hurd's prairie portrait will be visible from the air for the next year, and he hopes it will make people think about the man whose face is now part of the Kansas landscape.
We need a Will Rogers right now. I really think. I think this country needs a Will Rogers.
Stan Hurd, a man whose art is as down to earth as the people he depicts. In Dodge City, this is Larry Hatteberg.
It turns out that was just the beginning for Stan. Since that story in 1984, he has created some 80 field designs. Stan just recently completed this 4-acre project in southwest China. It is permanent landscape art that took him 15 months to complete with the help of 10 workers every day. Now to a quiet place in the southeast part of the state. It was once a bustling little Kansas town, but times change. When Larry visited in 1993, the only person left was Lee Blankenship.
Monette, Kansas. A lot of old memories. A little town, long gone.
Gone, but not forgotten. Around the turn of the century, this was a busy place. Now the railroad and the traffic are history. But there is someone who remembers.
Yeah, we spend a lot of happy hours here. We sure do.
His name is Lee Blankenship. We found him in his thinking place.
I am real comfortable.
Lee collects things, old things. Here, in what is left of the town's old store, is history.
Treasures.
Everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, something old, something strange.
Mind-boggling.
Some things only history and Lee remember.
Pop bottle that made in Sedan, Kansas, and they went out of business about the turn of the century. Here's an older one that I don't know where it's made, but it's got a marble in it. And you can drink it, and yet that marble is the seal, the lid, and it doesn't leak a drop.
Lee spends hours in this remote part of Chautauqua County.
A lot of happy hours.
Touching, cleaning, and wondering what a particular piece is, who had it, and the stories it might tell.
Well, I've just always been fascinated by hardware items and antiques, and we had so much on both sides of the history on our parents and grandparents that we just started adding to it. There are several hundred hammers in here, just all different types. But I like it to where everything turns like that, where you display it better. And it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of junk to get it that way. Now here's a real old grindstone. But I made that whole thing, so you just sawed hedge tree out in timber and cut it in and made the bearings and all. You've got to preserve part of that stuff or it should be gone forever.
And his stuff is not just for the old folks.
Can you pick that up when it goes in the air?
It's a corn cob with turkey feathers in it. Kids used to throw it up in the air. Lee still does.
Oh, I almost got you. I don't think you can outrun it.
And how about this? Anyone remember what it's called?
Okay, now here we go with this hip roller.
This is an amazing place, Lee's little history house, where you can almost smell the past lurking in the present.
It's peaceful, content. You don't worry about anything out here. I'm at home. We moved here in 1959, and when we leave here, half a mile west on the hill, it's a cemetery.
Don't you just love some of Hatteberg's people? Where does he find these people? That guy was wonderful. That is a wrap for this week, but next time, Grace Wu Monnet is a master of both Chinese calligraphy and Kung Fu. She is a one-of-a-kind Kansan for sure. Also,
you don't expect to get everything out of life. You got to give something away in order to survive.
Charlie Moore could fix your tire and he could fix your soul. He could straighten out your wheel, then straighten out your life. This Kansan of the past has something to teach us here in the present. And
I caught this one out in the Chippewa Hills last spring. And this is the one I'm doing here. I don't make up any butterfly. They're all done from actual models.
he was one of the world's foremost butterfly experts and artists, and his legacy continues to this day. You'll learn all about it next week. I'm Susan Peters. It was great to have you with us. Join Larry and I next time for another half hour of Hatteberg's People. We'll see you then.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, supporting KPTS and the communities it serves in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Support also comes from viewers like you. Thank you. Call KPTS to receive a DVD copy of this program for a $40 donation. You can also send a check or money order along with the program name, date, and time to the address on your screen. And you will receive a 1-year KPTS membership.